Fantastic. So, you ready to get back into God's Word? All right, for the rest of you ready to get back into God's Word? All right, so I want you to get your Bibles out. Turn in your Bibles to 1 Samuel 13. We're going to get there. I want to kind of get you up to speed. Again, just a reminder, we're in a series called In Search of a King, placing our lives in the best hands possible. And the reality is, this is what the human heart struggles throughout existence. This is what we're battling, is who will be king of our heart, right? I mean, that's the reality that we're facing. Who will be king of our heart? And God gave us a period of history of the Jewish people to kind of teach us about who really deserves to be king. And I want you to put that image up there, would you? That map that this timeline, we talked about that this is a period of time in the purple where before that we had the creation, the fall, and the flood and all that stuff that's happening. There were slaves in Egypt, and then God called a guy from a burning bush. Anybody remember his name? Yeah, Moses, and he went down and they liberated the people and brought them into the promised land. And during that period of time, Joshua led them into the promised land, and they were to go in and conquer it, to take over. The 12 tribes were to have their spots and divvy up the land as God had determined. And then they were ruled by judges, and after the judges, they wanted a king. They wanted something better, and they said to Samuel, who was God's prophet, God's spokesman at the time, they said, "We want a king." And this disturbed Samuel, and he said, listen, it's okay. Listen, they're not rejecting you, they're rejecting me. And the Hebrew word for rejection is not like you're on a date and you're like, listen, this just really isn't going to work out. It's not you, it's me. It's not that at all. It's not me, it's you. The problem is not me. The problem in this equation is you're in it. And that's the attitude and the air of that word of rejection. It's like, I hate you. I don't want you to be a part of this. And my question for you is, what does God have to do to get you to hate him so much that you don't want to be a part of your life? Now, I don't know what you've gone on, what's happened in your life, but maybe there's some things in your life that you may have been so frustrated, so disappointed in God, saying, God, where are you? But what does God have to do to get you to hate him so much? Because there's nothing, if you think about it, in reality, there's nothing he could do to make you hate him like that. But they got to a point where they said, we don't want you, we want a king. And so that's the struggle in the human heart. We want somebody other than God. And oftentimes God gives us lessons. He gives us exactly what we want so that we can learn that it's not what we really wanted in the first place. Hello? Are you with me? Come on, are you with me? Sometimes he does that. So the reality is he's going to give them exactly what they wanted. So he gave them a king from the Benjamites. And the Benjamites were like the military clan of the 12 tribes. And they're like, we got the one. And he brought out King Saul, and from the least of the tribe, but he stood up like a foot taller than the rest. And they're all looking at him going, he's the guy. I mean, like, he's got muscles where I didn't even know they've got muscles. And, he's the one that's going to lead us in this military campaign. He's going to lead us and be the kind of king that we were looking for. And unfortunately, he wasn't. I mean, God said, I'll give you the kingdom forever, but if you would just listen to me. That's what he says in 1 Samuel chapter 13, after he had totally messed things up. He said this in verse 13 of 1 Samuel. So look at it. 1 Samuel 13, he said, you acted foolishly, Samuel said. You have not kept the command the Lord your God gave you. If you had, he would have established your kingdom over all Israel for all time. So he would have, if you would just listen to him, he would have established your kingdom forever. He's the first king in that timeline. And so God gives them exactly what they wanted. But then he says this in verse 14. He says, but now your kingdom will not endure. The Lord has sought out a man after his own what? His own heart, and appointed him leader of his people because you have not kept the Lord's command. So he removes Saul from being king, but he's still king at that point. So 2 years into his reign, which we know it's about 42 years that he's king over Israel, in year 2, God says, we had to vote, you're out. But he's still going to be king until God establishes the next king. Because God says, I'm searching and I've sought out a man that's after my own heart, that wants to listen and obey, to follow me. And we know who follows Saul. Anybody know who follows Saul as king? It's King David. And so Samuel in chapter 15, actually chapter 16, as God rejects Saul, he anoints David as king. So go to chapter 16 of 1 Samuel, and I'm just kind of moving you through here to get where we need to go. But he says in verse 1, the Lord said to Samuel, how long will you mourn for Saul, since I have rejected him as king over Israel? Fill your horn with oil and be on your way. I am sending you somewhere. Where is he sending him to? He's sending him to Jesse, who lives in where? Bethlehem. This is in the tribe of Judah. He says, I have chosen one of his sons to be king. Now, this is interesting because this is prophetic. This is a part of the blessing that goes all the way back to Genesis chapter 49. That God had promised that out of the tribe of Judah, there would be a king. Now, I want you to pause right there and jump back with me in Genesis chapter 49. So while you're going back there, so God is, Jacob is known as Israel, and they're known as the Israelites, and he has these 12 boys, and he blesses each one of them. As we talked about last time about Saul, that he came from the tribe of Benjamin, which they're known as this military campaign, what they set out, they're going to get it done. And that was the guys from Benjamin. But this is from the tribe of Judah. And look what he says in verse 8. So Jacob is blessing. It's like this prophetic word upon his children. It's like what you hope for, what you want, and this is what he's saying. He says in verse 8, Judah, your brothers will praise you. Your hand will be on the neck of your enemies. Your father's sons will bow down to you. You are a lion's cub, O Judah. You return from the prey, my son. Like a lion, he crouches and lies down. Like a lioness, who dares to rouse him? Then he says this, the scepter will not depart from who? From Judah. And nor the ruler's staff from between his feet. So I want to pause right there because there's more to this blessing that we're going to get to. But here he promises that out of the tribe of Judah, there's going to be a ruler. There's going to be a leader. There's someone that's going to lead the people of Israel. And so they were waiting for this day. They knew at one point, some point, God is going to bring somebody that would lead this group of people from the tribe of Judah. And he's doing it now. So he brought Saul into the picture, but Saul was a bust. Saul only thought about himself and only what he wanted to do, wasn't wanting to listen to what God wanted for him, which oftentimes, if you think about ourselves, don't we do that too? Like if we were to be honest, don't we really want to do what we want to do? That sometimes we don't want to listen to him. Sometimes we refuse to listen to his wisdom, and as a result, there are consequences to those actions. And what he's saying is, listen, Saul is just like the human heart, just like for you and for me. It's like if you're like, here's a guy that wants nothing to do with God, only about himself, and do it his only thing. See, he missed it, and you think you want somebody like that as king? I'm going to give you the complete opposite. I'm going to show you somebody that's completely devoted to me. Are you going to want him as king? Are you going to want him as king of your life? Would he be the one that you would want to place your life in his hands? Would he be worthy of it? Now listen, before you start getting like, whoa, where's he going with this? The reality is, the question is, who's king of your life? And he's trying to bring these pictures of who we want to be king. And are they the ones that are worthy to be the king of our lives? Now listen, so I want you to go back to 1 Samuel chapter 16. So he says, I want you to go to Jesse of Bethlehem, the tribe of Judah, and choose one of his sons to be king. Look at verse 2. But Samuel said, how can I go? Saul will hear about it and kill me, because Saul is still king. Even though he'd been rejected by God, he was still king for 40 years. The Lord said, take a heifer with you and say, I have come to sacrifice to the Lord. Invite Jesse to the sacrifice, and I will show you what to do. You are to anoint for me the one that I indicate. So Samuel did what the Lord said. When he arrived at Bethlehem, the elders of the town trembled when they met him. They asked, do you come in peace? Samuel replied, yes, in peace. I come to sacrifice to the Lord. Consecrate yourselves and come to the sacrifice with me. Then he consecrated Jesse and his sons and invited them to the sacrifice. When they arrived, Samuel saw Eliab and thought, surely the Lord's anointed stands here before the Lord. But the Lord said to Samuel, you remember this verse, do not consider his appearance or his height, for I've rejected him. The Lord does not look at things man looks at. Man looks at what? the outward appearances, but the Lord looks at the heart because he's looking for a heart that's devoted to him. Then Jesse called Abinadab and had him pass in front of him. But Samuel said, the Lord has not chosen this one either. Jesse then had Shammah pass by, but Samuel said, nor has the Lord chosen this one. Jesse had 7 of his sons pass before Samuel, but Samuel said to him, the Lord has not chosen these. So he asked Jesse, are these all the sons you have? There is still the youngest, Jesse answered, but he's just tending sheep. I mean, like you wouldn't want somebody like him, would you? I mean, how would you feel about it if you were like hearing that? Like, not him. Like, not him. But he goes on to say, listen, so send for him. So he says, we will not sit down until he arrives. Verse 12. So he sent and had him brought in. He was ruddy with a fine appearance and handsome features. And the Lord said, what? What did he say? He said, rise and anoint him. He is the one. So in that moment, Samuel anoints David as king. Saul is king. He's on the throne. Even though he's been rejected by God, he now has found the one. Listen, you wanted him, but he's not the one. Now I've got somebody that you'll want. He's the one. And so he anoints him as king, but he's still waiting for the moment when Saul is off the throne so that David can become the official king. Now, so in that moment, there's 40 years that he goes through. And I'm going to kind of summarize some of this before you through the rest of 1 Samuel. And you'll find out that in those moments, you find out the qualities of David. Like you find out he's exactly what we're looking for. See, by the time this wraps up, in this moment, they're going, yes, those qualities, if you're looking for a king, he's got it. So the first quality we find is in chapter 17. Where we find that David is incredibly courageous and incredibly brave. It's the story of David and Goliath. And I know that we've talked about this before. Maybe you've read it before. But the Philistines had a giant. They brought him out. He was taunting the people of Israel. And as they're saying, listen, and David shows up from his dad, sending him to his brothers on the front line, saying, take them some lunch. He gets there. Here's this Philistine and says, is anyone going to do anything about this? They bring him into Saul, and Saul is hiding in his tent. He's freaked out, doesn't want to do anything about it, feels absolutely scared out of his mind. And David's like, listen, somebody's got to do something about that. So he's like, here, you go and you take care of it. He's like, listen, he's killed the lion and what else? What other animal? The bear. I mean, he's like, listen, I've done this before. This is no different, right? And so this is a moment where he goes out with a sling and stones and he takes down Goliath, and he is this man of courage, this man of bravery. I mean, like, they're looking at him as like the man's man, like, whoa, who is this guy? Just who is this kid? But yet here's this kid that shows a great amount of courage. And they're going, yes, listen, if there's anything a king needs, he's going to need some courage, right? A king's going to need to be courageous because he's going to be facing some really difficult situations. But not only that, you find out that he's an extremely patient individual. See, as Saul was king and David is anointed as the successor, David's fame started to rise. And in chapter 18, you'll notice in verse 7, they would dance and sing, Saul has slain his thousands, and David his what? What's it say? His tens of thousands. So they're going, listen, this is great. Look at this guy. This guy's amazing. Saul, you're okay, but this guy's amazing, right? It's like, you're playing kickball at recess, and you got 2 people, and you get to choose. And you're like, oh, great, they're going to choose him, right? And so this jealousy starts to rise. And he's like, man, I don't like this man. And so his jealousy continues to rise, and he's getting disturbed by his victories and his praises. But the thing about David, he's a patient guy. He's just patient. He's like, I'm not going to retaliate. I'm not going to get agitated. I'm just going to be patient with you. But not only that, so he's courageous, he's patient, because as a king, you need to be patient, but also you need to be loyal. Saul had a son. Anybody know his name? His name is Jonathan. And so Jonathan is a good friend of David. And so all he knows is that Saul, his dad, and David are at odds. They're not working. So when David says, can I come spend the night? Saul's like, no, I'll try to kill you. Okay? So the reality is like, he knows that there's a problem between these two. They don't like each other. Saul doesn't like David. And David's just being patient and just kind of waiting things out. And he knows that he's the coming king, but he's waiting and he's just going to wait. But anyways, there's a loyalty to his friend. And that even though his father is doing something that's inappropriate and not right and just is completely out of his mind, he's still loyal. And that's the thing you need as a king. You're going to need him to be courageous. You're going to need him to be patient. You're going to need him to be a loyal king. But not only that, there's more. He's also a great warrior. See, they would battle the Philistines, and they would be their mortal enemy for many years. And David would go out, and he would win victory after victory over the Philistines. And so David had acquired this idea of being a warrior. So not only is he courageous, he's not only patient, he's not only loyal, but he's a warrior. He's like somebody who's not afraid to go into battle and to stand up for the people of for God and the people of Israel. But not only that, there's even more. There's another quality about David. Now be patient with me, okay? Hang in there. I'm trying to lay this down. I want to lay this foundation and this framework for you to understand. Listen, David is a great guy. Hello. David is a great guy. So even in those moments where Saul is like, he's out to get him, he's throwing spears at him, he's sending his army after him, and David is on the run, has no idea why this guy is hot on his tail that wants to destroy him. He is like, listen, and he stays away and out of arm's reach. And one time he finds himself in a cave where, if you remember the story, that Saul went in to use the facilities. And here was his opportunity where his men are saying, listen, here's your moment. Take him out, slit his throat, and be done with this. And he doesn't. In fact, he doesn't. He has two opportunities, but he spares his life at both times. You know, you and I, we may not be that patient. But the thing is, David was merciful. David was merciful. He could look at people, and even though they deserved something, he was able to forgive and be merciful. Now, I say all that to say, listen, this is who David is. When God says to Samuel, anoint David, son of Jesse, from the tribe of Judah, he's saying, this is exactly what the people would say. This is exactly what we want. A man who's courageous, a man who's patient, a man who's loyal, a man who's a warrior, and a man who is merciful. I mean, this is exactly what we're looking for. And then this is what he says in 1 Samuel. As the time comes, Saul is killed. Saul takes his own life. And he says, this is the moment where he is anointed as king of Israel. The moment has finally come. And I want you to look at 2 Samuel chapter 7. God says a word to Nathan, the prophet, to go tell David. Now as king, this is what he says. Look at this. Look at this. 2 Samuel chapter 7, look at verse 4. He says, that night the word of the Lord came to Nathan saying, go tell my servant David, this is what the Lord says. Are you the one to build me a house to dwell in? I have not dwelt in a house from the day that I brought the Israelites up out of Egypt to this day. I have been moving from place to place with a tent as my dwelling. Wherever I moved with all the Israelites, did I ever say to any of their rulers whom I commanded to shepherd my people Israel, why have you not built a house of cedar? Built me a house of cedar. Now then, tell my servant David, this is what the Lord Almighty says. I took you from the pasture, remember, because he's a shepherd boy. And I took you from the pasture and from following the flock to be ruler over my people Israel. I have been with you wherever you have gone. I have cut off all your enemies from before you. Now I will make your name what? What's he say? I will make your name great, like the names of the greatest men of the earth. Wow. That's pretty honorable, don't you think? I mean, that's pretty impressive. Like of all the great names, your name will be among them. And he goes on to tell him, he's saying, listen, in verse 10, and I will provide a place for my people Israel and will plant them so that they can have a home of their own and no longer be disturbed. Wicked people will not oppress them anymore as they did at the beginning and have done ever since the time I appointed leaders over my people Israel. I will also give you rest from all your enemies. The Lord declares to you that the Lord himself will establish a house for you when your days are over and you rest with your fathers. In other words, what's he saying? When you die, right? When you die, I will raise up your offspring to succeed you, who will come from your own body, and I will establish his kingdom. He is the one who will build a house for my name, and I will establish the throne of his kingdom forever. I will be his father, and he will be my son. When he does wrong, I'll punish him with the rod of men, with floggings inflicted by men. But my love will never, say never, never be taken away from him. So as I took it away from Saul, whom I removed from before you. Your house and your kingdom will endure how long? How long? Forever before me. Your throne will be established for how long? Forever. I mean, this is what God's saying. God is saying, you're the guy. Like when you look at Saul over here, not kind of Saul and David, okay? So Saul, he's like everything that they don't want. But this is what he's trying to say. When you are trying to be the king of your own life, it ends in disaster. And it won't last very long. When you disregard what I say, there are consequences that come, and you will find that it ends in failure. But there's the one over here that you're looking at him going, oh man, he's courageous, he's loyal, he's a warrior, he's patient, he's merciful. And then he's got the favor of God on his life. If there's ever anyone that you would want to place your life in their hands, it would be David, right? And everyone is going, absolutely. That's why we name our kids David, right? Because we're like, he's the best. He's the best of the best because he wants to make his name of the greatest of the great. And we're like, of course. We could easily place our lives in his hands. Of course. I mean, to this day, he's still the greatest king of Israel. This is in their minds. They're going, this is absolutely awesome. And then as king, he reunites the people and brings them together in a way that the people of Israel had never seen before. He ends up conquering Jerusalem. He brings back the Ark of the Covenant, which is the presence of God. He brings it to Jerusalem, and everything is great. Everybody's like, everything is up and to the right. Like, I can't believe how good it is. And how could we ever wanted Saul? Because of what? David. Oh, we need everything. And so they're willing to give everything to a person who's committed to the Lord. And that's great. And you're like, well, yeah, duh. That's exactly what we should do. I mean, isn't it great to have a leader that is courageous, patient, loyal, a warrior, and merciful, and who has the favor of God in their lives? Isn't it like, yes, this is a no-brainer. But then something happens. All of a sudden, the house of cards collapses. And everything changes. In one moment, it changes. Look at with me. 2 Samuel chapter 11. Look at verse 1. Everything that they were like, yes, this is it. And you remember the story, right? In the spring, at the time when kings go off to war, David sent Joab, his commander, out with the king's men and the whole Israelite army. They destroyed the Amorites and besieged Rabbah, but David remained in Jerusalem. Now, that's not horrible, but when the kings would go off, that was when they normally would go and lead battle, because he's a warrior and he's courageous. But the thing is, he chose to stay back. Not a bad idea, just what happens next. Verse 2. One evening, David got up from his bed. Remember this? Hello? And he walked around the roof of the palace. From the roof, he saw a woman bathing. The woman was very beautiful. And David sent someone to find out about her. The man said, "Isn't this Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam?" Now, if it stopped there, you'd be like, no big deal. Yeah, hey, dude. But it doesn't end there, does it? There's a piece of, oh, by the way, there's another piece you need to know. What's that piece? It's kind of a big deal. Hello? It's kind of a big deal. Oh, yeah, and she's the wife of Uriah the Hittite. David sent messengers to get her. She came to him, and he slept with her. And she had purified herself from her uncleanness, and then she went back home. The woman conceived and sent word to David saying, what? I am pregnant, right? And so all of a sudden, what was happening in secret, only a few people knew, was going to start the cascade of problems for David. Where everything was where you thought it should be, where everybody was like, this is the guy. If anyone could trust in him, it would be him. But there was a weakness and a problem in his private life that destroyed everything. And so what does he do? He says, I got to fix this. I got to fix this. And don't we try to fix our own private mistakes? So he brings Uriah back and he gets him drunk and says, go home and sleep with your wife so he could get this off of his to-do list, But he doesn't do it. So then he sends word to Joab. He says, listen, I want you to put him on the front lines. I want you to put everybody back. And when they all draw back, he's alone, he's defenseless, and he's killed. Gets word that he has died, and so he brings her into his home and makes her his wife. He thinks it's over. He thinks he's got it solved. No one needs to know. No one needs to know this. I mean, everybody knows me as courageous and patient and loyal and merciful and a warrior. They just need to know that about me. Because if they just know this about me, then we're good. But God doesn't let that rest. Because David's got a problem that he must deal with. And so he sends Nathan to rebuke him. And Nathan, who's the prophet, came and told him what was going on. And David repents and asks God's forgiveness. There's a psalm that talks about how his bones were wasting away during this process. Can I just ask you, aren't you grateful for God's forgiveness? Aren't you grateful that when you repent and you say, God, I am wrong. What have I done? God, well, I am wrong. Please forgive me. Can I ask, aren't you grateful that God forgives? There is no way on earth that he could carry this. There's no way he could survive. You see, the reality is, we're grateful that God forgives. The problem is we struggle to forgive one another, do we not? I mean, you talk about the love chapter in 1 Corinthians 13. I did a wedding yesterday, and I thought about using that passage. I used some other stuff, but I'll never forget. It says, you remember the love is patient, love is kind. We like all that stuff. But then it says this one part in there. Love keeps no record of rights, right? We don't need to brag you up. We don't need to point out all the things you did right because we don't want you to get a big head. Rustin's got a big enough head as it is, right? It's like, we don't need to give you a big, no, it doesn't say that. It keeps no record of what? Of wrongs. You see, when we seek forgiveness, we find that God separates us so far from our sin, from the east as far as the west, that he takes us and he washes us as white as snow. And I mean, so David is relishing in this moment. And so we can be thankful for forgiveness, but understand this, guys, there are still consequences to our actions. And what happened to follow was everything collapses. Bathsheba loses the child. His son Absalom rebels. There's rape going on amongst his siblings. His son Absalom decides he's manipulating the situation and rips the kingdom out of David's hands. Now David is on the run, and David has nowhere to go. He finds himself trying to just get out of the way. And one day Absalom is stuck in a tree and they kill him. And now David is back on the throne. And David says something in chapter 23. And so stay with me. Chapter 23 of 2 Samuel. These are the last words. You got to piece this all together. He gets it because you and I failed to get it sometimes. But he gets it. And he gets it right here. And it connects all the way back to the prophecy in Genesis chapter 49. But look at it with me. David says this. He says, these are the last words of who? Yeah, David. I mean, so this is going to be like really important, right? Like if there's anything I've figured out over the years that I've lived and the years that I've been leader over the people of Israel, I figured something else. I figured something out. The oracle of David, son of Jesse, the oracle of the man exalted by the Most High, the man appointed by the God of Jacob. Again, this prophecy of Judah, Israel's singer of songs. He says this, the Spirit of the Lord spoke through me. His word was on my what? Was on my tongue. I mean, it was here. It was working. It was here. I was speaking it and doing it. The God of Israel spoke. The rock of Israel said to me, when one rules over men in righteousness, when he rules in the fear of God. So in other words, what he's saying is, when you rule with justice and righteousness, when a person is in leadership and they rule with justice, but also they rule with godliness, when these two mix together, this is what happens. When you follow what God says and you respect him as God and leader and true king, this is what he says. He says, he is like the light of morning at sunrise on a cloudless morning. I don't know how many of you saw the sunrise this morning. Anybody? Wake up and just kind of see it float up the sky? And you're like going, this was beautiful and it's amazing. Some of you love to take pictures and post it on Facebook and Instagram. I love it, so keep doing it. Because I'm not up that early. But I love looking at it. And it's amazing. And when you see that ball, that sun rising in the sky, it does something for you. It gives you hope. It brings a smile to your face. It's almost like today is a new day. Doesn't he say in Lamentations, his mercies are new when? Every morning. You see, there's something about it. When you rule with justice and righteousness and you rule with godliness, that what you do is you give hope to people, joy to people, and it's like a new start for people. And not only that, it's like the brightness after sun that brings the grass from the earth. In other words, what he's saying is it brings life. It brings life. It brings exactly what you need. See, when you listen to me, when you rule with righteousness, not your own thoughts, not like in the Judges, where every man did what was right in his own eyes. No, you do what's right in my eyes. You do what I say. And you rule, and you respect me as God. He's like, you will bring hope, joy, new life to the people that you lead. But the problem is, David realizes, I didn't do that. I didn't do that. And so he said, I had to make things right. Is not my house right with God? Because it was once wrong and now had to be made right. He said, has he not made with me an everlasting covenant, arranged and secured in every part? Will he not bring to fruition my salvation and grant me my every desire? And then he goes on to talk about verse 6 and 7, which gets a little bit sketchy. But evil men are all to be cast aside like thorns, which are not gathered with the hands. Whoever touches thorns uses a tool of iron or a shaft of a spear. They are all burned up. Like he's talking about something is going to be done with wickedness and evil, but I can't, because I can't do it with my hand. And it goes all the way back to who will. It goes back all the way to who actually truly is worth you putting your life in, to their hands. Even though David was everything they wanted, he was still what? He was still a sinner. And he's still broken like you and me. But there is one who's worth our trust, our absolute trust. You see, don't you notice it, like when you look at people, isn't it disappointing when they fail you? Isn't it disappointing when a leader, that's like, you should know better? And without naming names, listen, there are people that are in the news media, and there's people in politics and entertainment and all this stuff, and you hear stuff about them, you're like, I used to think this way, and then I heard you did that. It's like that changes things, doesn't it? And all of a sudden, my perspective is like, well, is there anyone that's worth following or trusting? Is there anyone that's got it together that I can completely put my life into their hands? And my answer is yes, there's absolutely one. And Jacob talked about it in Genesis 49. Go back. Genesis 49, we're going to wrap it up. Okay, you still with me? I know we're like 2 minutes after. Can you hang with me for 2 more minutes? Yes. Hello? Okay, all right. So look at this. In Genesis chapter 49, he says about Jacob, about this, and he goes on to verse 10. He says, the scepter will not depart from Judah, nor the ruler's staff from between his feet, until he comes to whom it belongs. See, they're thinking it's David. David's going, yes, this is it, right? But there is one who's going to come from the moment that Jacob said this. 2,000 years later, there's going to be a baby born in Bethlehem who's from the tribe of Judah, from the Lion of the tribe of Judah, who is going to have the government rest upon his shoulders. He will be an everlasting Father, mighty God, Prince of Peace. I mean, this is the one that's coming 2,000 years later. The one that he's talking about will be born. And it says this, he goes on, until he comes to whom the kingdom belongs. And the obedience of the nations is his. He will tether his donkey to a vine, his colt to the choicest branch. He will wash his garments in wine, his robes in the blood of grapes. His eyes will be darker than wine, and his teeth whiter than milk. The point of it is, he's saying, listen, there is one that's coming that's truly the king, that's truly the one that you're looking for. You thought it was David. Yes, he was really good, but he's a sinner. He's broken. Listen, you can follow, you can respect, but you can't trust in him. This is why Solomon says in Proverbs 3, he says, trust in who? Trust in the Lord. Trust in the Lord. If there's one you could completely entrust, hello, are you with me? If there's one you could completely trust your life to, it is the one that Jacob is saying, he will come. When he comes, you can trust him with your life. And his name, just take a wild guess, who could it possibly be? This is the one you can completely trust. So, I mean, look at this. This is the kings. He's saying, here's a guy that doesn't want anything to do with God. Here's a guy that has everything he wants to do with God. Can you put your lives, are they the best hands possible? And the answer is no. His hands are the best hands. Okay, are you with me? Is this mic on? Just curious. His hands are the best hands possible. And did they figure it out? Not yet, because there's more kings to come. So once you stand to your feet, my question for you this morning is, who's the king of your life? Who's worth it? Who can you place your life into their hands? And we know the answer is Jesus, but we know that mentally. Now the question is, practically, do we live it out where he is king? God, thank you for this morning. Thank you for your word. Thank you for how true and alive it is. How years ago it was written, but it was applicable for us today. God, you have said from the beginning that there was one that's coming where the government will rest upon his shoulders, where he will lead with righteousness and godliness. God, he is truly the king, King Jesus. And I pray, God, that he would be king over our lives. But for some of us in this room, we've rejected you as king. We said we don't want you. And God, you allow us to get what we want because you want to teach us that we're everything that we ever wanted and ever needed. And so, God, I pray that wherever we are on the journey, wherever we are in this room, that if there's anyone that is still searching, that today maybe they would find that King Jesus is truly the only king who rightfully should sit on the throne of our lives. And so, God, you tell us to bow where every knee will bow and every tongue will confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, that's what you long for from us. And I pray if there's anyone in this room that's never done that, today may be the day where they say, Jesus, be my king, the king of my life. God, we love you. Thanks for a wonderful day. Help us to go and celebrate you as our king. And it's in Jesus' name we pray. And all God's people said, have a great day. Well, hey, thanks for joining us and watching this video of our sermon this past Sunday. We hope it's been an encouragement to you. We believe in the ministry of what's happening at Brighton Chapel, and we believe it's going to make a difference in your life. And so we hope that you'll come back and be a part of it. We hope you'll visit us in person, be a part of what's happening here at Brighton Chapel. We hope you have a great day.